All right, so we'll go right into it. So basically this session is looking at the pains of peering, or in other words, if I could put it slightly better, is that what are the overheads of peering? We tried to come up with this panel because we understand very well that there are a number of challenges that networks are facing trying to peer in the region. And the question is, what are those challenges and how can we overcome them if there is a way of overcoming them? Or better yet, how do we understand what those challenges are for those who are trying to grow their peering or get into peering a lot more? So we try to bring different actors or players in the ecosystem. We were looking at an exchange point operator, starting from with Andrew, a submarine cable operator who's pretty present in the region, an operator in the region, and someone who's trying to do, I think, should I say, carrier? Right? Yes, a carrier service. We did want to get also a CDN as well present, but that didn't pan out. So we do have our 4 panelists, and to get us started, I'd like to give them an opportunity to first introduce themselves, what they do, and then we'll get into the questions that, and also basically open up the floor for questions and discussions. So let's start with Ben.
I'm Ben Madison from Work Online Communications. We are a wholesale network services provider. We provide long-haul connectivity and IP transit to other network operators. We are 37271, and we peer fairly extensively in this region, and so we have a degree of experience in this. We have a selective peering policy. If you'd like to discuss what that means, then I'm available for drinks upstairs at the bar after this.
Okay, I'm Graham from eNetworks. We are a service provider mostly to end users, mostly in the enterprise and corporate space, fiber to the business, and services on top of that fiber. Mostly focusing on the South African market, so not really doing much cross-border stuff at the moment. We rely on our partners from the undersea cables to do that for us. We have an open peering policy, and we peer extensively throughout South Africa, 5 exchange points and a whole bunch of PNIs. For us, peering is about getting directly, firstly, to content networks, because our customers are always interested in getting to content, but we're also looking to make sure that we've got short, low latency, managed paths to as many of the networks as possible, because we have customers who are going to, so someone is going to be at home and going to want to get to their web server at the office or their mail server at the office. They're not going to use us for every single bit of connectivity. People move between mobile networks and fiber to the home networks, and we need to make sure that all of the internet services that people are using are available to them with good performance.
Okay, Simon Maye from SICOM. We are a submarine couple, and we have an IP network. We provide transit, both wholesale and enterprise. We peer openly, except we don't peer with customers, of course, for obvious reasons. We don't consider traffic levels for peering, so we don't analyze if you're eligible or not eligible unless you're just a customer. Yeah, that's about it.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm from NAP Africa. We move bits from left to right. That's about it. Well, sometimes they go a bit up and down, but you know, this is just how it works. So this is about the real cost of peering, and I'm going to, I think, start this off by saying that peering is free at the point of exchange.
Thank you. So the first question I would like to pose to you all, that now that you've sort of introduced yourself, is what are the challenges, or what are the main challenges that you're seeing being operators and also being as an exchange point? What are you hearing from your members with respect to difficulties of when it comes to peering? What are the challenges? What are the cost overheads? If you could highlight that. Let's start with Andrew from an exchange.
Okay, so from an exchange point of view, one of the biggest problems that we have is training, is a skill set, and just an understanding of how BGP works, and I guess you could say how the internet works. We've had a lot of people joining our internet exchange and phoning us with support requests after hours saying, I cannot get to website XYZ. And we'll go back to those people and say, well, that website's not available at the exchange, so you wouldn't be able to see it. And they say, well, how do I get to the rest of the internet then? And you say, well, you get there through your transit provider. And they're like, what's that? So there is a bit of training that I think is lacking. I know there's a lot of in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of effort that has been made to get people trained up on this sort of thing, but it takes a lot of our support time. And there are also certain common issues that we have with certain vendor equipment that tend to cause a lot of support issues with us as well. So, yeah, it's it's not as easy as it looks.
Okay. Simon.
Yes, I think in the same line of education, I think education also to peers. I think most of the peers don't know what peering is, especially when you mention about bilateral peering. I think we've sent emails saying we do bilateral peering. Then the questions that come as private messages is, what is bilateral peering? So I think more education to members, peers, maybe during some forums, thanks to BS for Peers. And recently work online, tried something in Nairobi. Then last mile expensive. I think most of the guys don't see why they should be able to pay pricey last miles to the internet exchange points. Okay, so costs, in terms of cost, we have the last mile component, we have port fees, maybe membership fee also, whereby guys maybe don't have a budget for that. So it's a big issue. I think in an exchange point recently, a CDN, no, it was not a CDN, one of the operators came and then announced a certain thousands of routes. And I think instead of saying thank you, most of the people say, I don't have bandwidth, you could have told me. So, yeah, so, and you could pick the frustration whereby somebody is thinking, I don't have the capacity, and you're coming to like flooding routes here, okay? The other point is, if I could have educated them, they could have pushed for bilateral peering so that I don't worry about that until I set up that session. So those are some of the major points that we have been facing. Also, we have the ignored mails, or just didn't see it. You send mails, somebody ignores, even not will peer later, no. And this is across the board, both bigger players. Somebody will say, I've been in the market for long, even before you came, so I can't peer with you. Your traffic levels are not enough for me to start peering with you. So they will stay for some time. Others, you peer with them, they're tracking your traffic level. 6 months down the line, they say, I'm going to de-peer you because since yesterday your traffic has gone below this. I don't think it's a game for people. I don't have time to be monitoring this session so that I see, or rather peering. My bandwidth has gone below this. It could be a reason. Somebody has an outage down there. So is it my problem? Do you de-peer so that we start again afresh?
Okay, so I'll pause you there because I know you have a lot more, and we'll come back to some of those points later. Graham.
So I'm going to echo what both of you have said. It's clearly a skill and a resource challenge. People don't have time and they don't respond to requests, and that can be requests for new peering, operational requests to fix problems and faults. But as part of that misunderstanding of how peering works and what goes on in the internet, I think we've also reached the point where many of the smaller operators or operators who've come into this market recently, they often expect that once they get to the exchange point, everything else is free. And it goes a bit to what Andrew was saying about, well, why can't I get to the whole internet over the exchange point? And a similar problem that I've experienced in a different way is that once you start peering across multiple exchange points, there are many networks who are selective about the prefixes they advertise, and as a smaller operator, they think that it's their prerogative to expect you to backhaul their traffic to the exchange point that is closest to them. And that's something that's often difficult to pick up if you're not very carefully monitoring your BGP and comparing prefix lists from different providers. But there are a lot of the smaller networks who are having this expectation that they're going to engineer the traffic to benefit themselves the most, and it's not always mutual, and the whole point about peering has always been about a mutually beneficial exchange of traffic.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the key points for us are similar. The cost of connectivity to get to a point of traffic exchange, an IXP or somewhere where I can build PNIs with people, is not so much of a thing for us because our network is designed around the kind of the natural hubs of the internet anyway. And very often when we're looking for a location to build a pop-in, one of the big factors in that will be that there's a reasonable size internet exchange there anyway. So by the time we've built, we're built right next door. For us, it's in this region. This is different from other regions where we peer. But in this region, the biggest factor is the administrative overhead. And I mean, all three of the other panelists have touched on this. The work that goes into making sure. So I mean, we try and automate our way out of that problem as much as possible. We auto-provision peering sessions. We have systems in place to monitor when things go up and down. We are alerted to when an existing peer pops up on a new exchange somewhere else where we're present. But trying to keep track of things like how many prefixes am I dropping on the floor from peer X because they can't be bothered to keep their registry updates up to date. Or down the line we'll almost certainly start having the same issues with RPKI when we start validating on RPKI. What Graham was talking about, making sure that where the agreement states it, we're seeing a consistent set of announcements at all locations. And explaining what we expect from a peering relationship to potential peers is time-consuming and admin-intensive, and frankly shouldn't be as complex as it is in a lot of cases. We require multiple locations because we don't want multi-AS convergent events to kick in when we lose a single piece of fiber. It's basically that simple. We value the stability of our customer services above the additional, marginal cost of having a bit more traffic on transit. And the time and effort that goes into, documenting and automating all of that stuff on our end quite often feels like it's wasted and is kind of being, met with dumb ears on the other side of the relationship, which is frustrating.
So is that the reason why you prefer a selective peering policy over an open policy?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons. So our bread and butter is as a transit provider. We don't get to build, two ends of a connection. Our network is there to provide connectivity between other network operators. And in the markets where, in Europe and stuff like that, we don't provide customer-facing services. We don't sell IP transit in Europe. And we're a lot more, from the commercial pressures that exist to not engage in peering aren't really present there. But in the markets where we provide services in Africa, it's very difficult for us to justify justify why many new peerings with people that are buying transit services like we provide in the same region, why that represents value for both parties. That's, for us, that is, that's shrinking our customer base effectively.
So if I can just add, since we're all being honest, so what Ben has said now, and what's important here is that Ben has explained his business model, right? And that has nothing to do with me. I'm an exchange point operator. I respect everybody's policies. And one of the issues that we have is quite simply politics. The number of emails I get to say, "Dear Andrew, please kick XYZ off of the exchange point because they will not peer with me." And we're trying to be a neutral party on this. I mean, that's not our place to get involved in. We need to respect everybody's peering policies, and I think that I just find that in the market in the moment, in the South African market, there's just not that much of an understanding of the different types of business models. Yes, there are going to be networks that will not peer with you. There are multiple reasons for that, whether it's nice or not, or whether you believe or whether you agree with what they're doing. That is just something that's going to happen. But you need to try and understand. You need to try and understand the business model that you're dealing with. And sorry, one other thing that I forgot. Speaking about multiple exchanges, broken RPF on certain devices is. Yeah. So.
Okay. So before I give the opportunity for someone else to comment, how many here have been denied peering at an exchange point by a peer? Okay, come to the mic. I want to hear the reasons.
It's a personality issue.
You can see the theme already. Huh?
Hi, my name is Nishal. I've been denied peering because somebody thought that the DNS services we provide needed to be more than 100 megabits a second worth of DNS before it was worth peering with us.
And Nishal, I'm pretty sure that policy was dynamic. It was catered specifically for you. So we've seen peering policies that they change dependent on who's doing the actual application. All right. So from the same company, we've seen peering policies that say you need to do 300 megabits of traffic before we'll peer with you. The very next day, the same company sends a peering policy to a different network and says you need to do 1.5 gigabit of traffic to us before we will peer with you. So it's, yeah.
So they have like what is it called? Changing goalposts. Peering policy.
It's effectively, it's a template. It's a word template, and they just basically go and check with the network team, how much traffic do they do, add 100 meg onto it, and then we're done.
Okay, Andrew.
I've been denied peering probably by the same people that Nishal is referring to, because it's sitting with our legal department for review. What that means, I'm still trying to figure out.
That's a new one. Okay.
Hi, Malcolm, assistant troublemaker again. I've been denied peering because my network is too small. At the same time, I've also been de-peered from the people that Nishal was talking about when they implemented the new peering policy that Nishal was talking about, and they de-peered my old network from my previous existence because we didn't have the 100 megabit of traffic. They de-peered.
So
and also because you're Malcolm.
So traffic
Yes.
levels is coming up as an issue. Where is Mark Tinker? CCOM, you say traffic ratios from, well, but we have someone from CCOM, so Mark doesn't need to take the floor. Traffic ratios is dead. I think that was the word you used. Traffic ratios as a selective peering policy is dead.
Yeah, so
what do you say to those people who are denying peering because of traffic ratios? Yes. Yes.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, Mark Seacom. Thanks, Michuki. So like Simon said earlier, yeah, we don't look at traffic, either ratios or volumes, but I do understand that it's important to some networks. But for us, it's old school thinking. You know, the internet is changing. It's going all over the place now, you know, with things happening all the time. we don't think it's really a useful metric anymore to decide how relevant a peer could be to you. But that's just our view.
Okay, so while you're still there, someone has clarified that there's a difference between ratios and volumes. So
Right.
what's your view about
For us, it doesn't matter either way. So ratio, volumes, it doesn't really matter at this point in time.
Ben tends to differ with that.
So, if I can comment on that quickly. So I agree that traffic ratios is a very flawed methodology. I mean, and the big CDNs have generally put pay to that because they arrive at an exchange point, and people who want to argue about traffic ratios, then the CDN says, that's fine, don't pay with me, I'll send your traffic to London and you can fetch it there. So the traffic ratios thing I don't think is a major issue in our market anymore. The traffic volumes thing, as Nishal was talking about, you have to have 100 megs to peer. I think in a simplistic sense, traffic levels is a kind of an easy first litmus test to figure out how big a network is and whether they're likely to actually have the skills and the capacity and the resources to deal with some of the technically administrative overhead to make things work. But obviously, if you're using that exclusively as your metric, then you miss out on important things like the DNS operators who are delivering small volumes of critical traffic.
So, Graham, I think just to... My keeps going off. I think... So, in practice, we haven't found that using volume of traffic as a mechanism to detect whether there's clue on the other side is actually useful. And what we have found is that most networks that want to implement this aggressively are really doing it as a tactic to say, buy IP transit from us. And we are saying that it's easier for our sales guys to get a kick in the butt to say, go sell to that guy, as opposed to applying pressure from the network side. You know what I mean? So if we want to sell to somebody, take a sales guy out and go sell the damn thing. If he doesn't buy it, he doesn't buy it. If he buys it, he buys it. It makes no difference to the quality of service delivered to our end customer, because that's the end goal. So like Simon said, unless you're a customer, we will peer with you. Simple as that.
I think to clarify, when someone approaches me for peering, generally I'm not going to deny them unless there's a technical reason that they're going to break my network. And there are a few networks out there who've done nasty things, and there's an orange ASN that we shall not speak of that's done that to me a few times. So there have been challenges in the past. I think certainly from my point of view, making a decision on whether to seek out peering is often very much related to volume, because the effort required of, as Andrew was saying, of training someone up and explaining to them how everything works and hand-holding them through the process when you're going to gain 512 kilobits of traffic is just not worth it. And so arguably that is a traffic-based policy, but if someone reaches out and asks, generally they're trying at least, so it's worth taking them through the process.
Yeah, but I'll add to that as well that 512 kilobits could be very valuable traffic. So it shouldn't be based on the amount of traffic, and the ratio also doesn't make sense for an eyeball heavy network. You're never going to get the ratio into what is defined in certain people's policies because it just doesn't make sense to do that.
Okay, so I completely agree that the idea of using ratios today is absurd. That metric has its origins in the US market of the 1990s, where there was no real meaningful distinction amongst the large operators between eyeball and content, and it was a question of who's carrying the traffic the more route miles, and it's not an accurate predictor of anything anymore. And I also agree with Mark that volumes are not usually an accurate predictor of cluefulness on the other side of the telephone line. Often, in South Africa, the reverse is true. It's true. Unfortunately, it's not pretty, but it's true. For us, the decision to peer is not usually a question of saving money by offloading traffic from transit. particularly given that we usually will need enough, capacity lying around to move that traffic back to transit if something falls over anyway. Where volumes become important for us is usually only when we're evaluating a move from an IX-based peering to PNI, and that's obvious. That's just maths. For us, the decision to peer is much more about in the markets in which we provide services, we're generally very well connected amongst the pure CDNs and the other networks that offer similar services to us. Generally speaking, we don't have a quality problem with those paths, and generally, there are all those exceptions to this, generally we don't have a capacity problem there. We would certainly look to engage in peering, proactively to bypass networks that are not keeping their end of the bargain to keep quality and capacity available. But in the absence of those kind of problems, we need to see some sort of benefit to offset the additional administrative burden. And if that burden is high, and we expect it to be high because we've got concerns about the ability of the other party to do their job effectively and not cause us extra work, and if we've got concerns about the resiliency of the interconnection because they're not able to meet us in multiple places, then that barrier is that much higher. There needs to be more value shown in order to offset that additional administrative cost.
Okay. So, Anthony, you've been there for a while.
Hi, I'm Anthony from the community. I'm not a troublemaker, generally. So, Mark, quick question. If I don't buy your transit, will you peer with me?
Yes.
Okay. So, fantastic. There we go. I think I do buy from you. So, question quickly from well, not really a question, a statement. I want to peer. I'm a peering prostitute, okay? So, like most of the guys would like to do open peering. In the spirit of the internet, we're still sitting in legacy thinking around commercials. So I support 100% what is being said now by Ben. If we make the peering decision, if most organizations make the peering decision purely technical, let's do a quick Skype, a quick Jitsi, or whatever we need to do, you can see that we've got the skill or the ability, let's peer. Rather than fighting this thing called the internet, where we actually need to peer more, we need to be more open, more engaging, let's rather do that than just make it commercial.
But Anthony, before you go, has that not changed in the last couple of years?
It has become a lot more open, but there are
it has become a lot more open.
There are still big
so it doesn't help
operators
that we
that don't.
Yeah. So are you speaking about a few specific networks that I want to be with?
Most definitely.
Okay. So we're talking about the
Most
obvious people
definitely.
here, right? But I think let's not generalize and say that the entire market hasn't changed, because
no,
it has changed.
All the small operators are happy to peer with all the small operators.
And I mean, there's
big
been a
operators.
lot of,
So let me ask, I come from Kenya, so you cannot take this, against me. I've heard that Telkom South Africa is not a ball player when it comes to peering. Has that changed?
No.
Well, no, hold on. Look, and again, this is about the business case, right? So Telkom South Africa peers, but they peer with networks that are valuable
CDNs.
to them. And you understand, you need to understand that from a carrier point of view. And you all know me. I'm all about openness. I will, I don't care how people connect, whether it's over an exchange or a PNI or Wi-Fi, whatever it is. I want people to connect. But we need to respect people's business policies and whether you agree with it or not. And I personally, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think they can get a lot more value out of peering. But these are the rules that they're working with. They are peering now, which is something that they weren't doing previously, or at least not in South Africa. They're now peering in South Africa, but they're doing it with content that is valuable to them and to their end users.
Not in the spirit of the internet.
So look at it.
So
If I could just jump in with regard to the Telkom South Africa thing. Telkom South Africa, in terms of how they've structured their business, and some of that's been due to Competition Commission imposing restrictions on them, and some of that's just been their own internal restructuring. Telkom South Africa is actually now 4 autonomous system numbers, and those 4 autonomous system numbers have distinctly different peering policies that are handled differently in different locations, they interconnect differently, and they do different things.
Yeah, but
according to
three
the
of
business model,
three of them fall under one company. We're all talking about, I think, 5713, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, can I jump in here from a carrier perspective?
Sure.
I asked my friend back here if I could jump the queue from a carrier perspective. I am a carrier. And I look at it like this.
We could tell.
I look at it like this, right? You can turn around and say, as a large carrier, I'm only peering with people who've got things that are valuable to me. But here's the problem with this. One day, you're going to need to peer with someone who has something valuable and you don't have anything of value to them. And the two-way street that should have existed is not there because you denied them at some point in the past. And the commercial model that says, I sell transit so I won't peer. Guess what? I sell transit too. I peer with everybody because it is a chance to demonstrate to people how good my network is. And yet, there are people who have chosen to move from peering to transit with me, and then the peering stops. And there are people in this room who've done that. I've never found that as an impediment to peering or to selling to them later. And if it is an impediment to me selling to them later, I need to fire my sales team.
Exactly.
Because that speaks to my sales team.
You are forward thinking.
It is about using the peering to demonstrate that my network has something from them. And if I've got something good over a peering, imagine how much more I could offer them when I'm transiting them. And I can play those marketing games as well as anyone else. So that it doesn't hold water. And the carrier arguments that you bring up.
Okay, so
Sorry.
Andrew,
Yeah.
if I can thank you for the round of applause because you are forward thinking. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are carriers that have got that peering policy in place at the moment. So whose responsibility is it to change their mind? Yours as what? Because all of these people, I know that everybody that's sitting on the stage right now has been in that position and has made an effort to try and get that to try and get that going. And what I'm trying to say is, it's like I said, I don't necessarily agree with the policy, but it is changing. It is changing slowly, and that it is changing. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, but to answer your question as to whose responsibility it is, if I want to peer with someone and they're saying no, then you know what? I'm going to go to the ends of the earth, if I truly want to do it, to force it. And if I have to, I'll route their traffic 3 times around the world until their customers are whining at them to peer with me.
Remember when I said politics earlier?
All right. Mark, then Jan.
Actually, in most cases, they do peer with you, but they'll peer with you in Europe.
Yeah.
Not in Africa.
They'll peer with you in Europe.
In Europe, yeah, they'll send your traffic there. So they are doing what someone could want to do.
All right. So let's do Mark and then Janzo.
So just, thanks, Michuki. So just 2 things. One is in line with what Ben was saying. There's obviously an admin consideration. And what we do as CECOM, as some peers might know, is that we will not peer with route servers in Africa at the moment, because we have found that the admin for doing that is a lot higher than peering with route servers outside Africa, right? And we found situations where that actually turned out to be the right decision, but that's what we're doing for now. So we keep the admin down that way. But I think addressing the point just now that's been going around is, look, ultimately there's customers at the end of the line that need to be serviced. So we do whatever it takes to get that peering done for their sake. And that means doing the things you don't want to do to make it happen. And I won't lie, as CECOM, we began IP operations seriously in 2012. We began in 2011, really 2012. And I won't lie, when we looked at getting, South African IP into our mix, we had to pay someone to get that done, right? I think it must have been Optinet, I can't recall who it was. But that didn't work out very well, and we went to IS. and we paid them for that, and that worked out okay, until we got to a stage where we don't need to pay them anymore for that privilege. Until we got to a stage where we could get Telkom on the table and say, Telkom, they asked for, I don't know, you need to show this arbor and that arbor, and we did all that work. And it took months to get the right person, never mind getting the right data. And we paid whatever we needed to pay for paid peering to get that sorted out for our customers until it made sense for them not to charge us for the privilege going forward. And now, you know, by the grace of whatever, we sit in a position where we don't have to pay anyone at this point to enjoy, you know, local traffic within South Africa. As you know, that's a big issue. But we had to do that. We had to do that. Okay. And I'm happy to play the politics with them, but ultimately, there's customers at the end.
All right, so
Michuki,
can we have...
Michuki, just to add one thing. So there's the price to pay, but at the end of it, you realize now they start knowing that they also need you, because at one point or the other, now you realize that when one route is not passing through, they're the ones who are asking. So,
okay. So Jan.
Hello. Does it work? Yes. Okay. Jan George, Internet Society. So to what Graham said, when you said we established some peering with networks that did bad things to us and we were not happy and things like this. So there is this manners thing that talks about the routing hygiene and how to behave like a good network. And what do you think? I know it's open peering policy and everything, but some people do some peering agreements, written peering agreements between each other when they peer. What do you think about putting in your peering agreement or in your peering decision when you decide to peer with somebody that this guy needs to sort of like obey or adhere to manners, what is written in manners as hygiene of their network, or else?
So before Ben goes off on a tangent, so I agree with you that standards on how these things should be done is an important part of the peering relationship, and networks that are failing to adhere to the network standards are candidates for being de-peered temporarily or perhaps permanently. I haven't ever permanently de-peered anybody, but I have temporarily de-peered people when they're putting junk into my BGP, putting junk into my network. I've physically shut down BGP sessions because it's what I've got to do to protect my network. I still don't think that there's a requirement to make that a contract, make someone sign a document. I think that the level of mutual, whether it's a physical handshake or a virtual handshake, I think that that there should be a sufficient understanding that what you are agreeing to in that handshake includes the general things like manners, and you can be explicit about it or you can be implicit about it depending on what the relationship is. But I don't think it needs to be boiled down to a contract that you get the lawyers to sign and 3 witnesses. I don't think that it should get to that point, but certainly a requirement for a mutual agreement on the internet standards. I mean, we all mutually agree that we're going to be talking BGP v4.
So
we all agree that, so let's include other things in that mutual agreement.
Adding that onto your peering policy as a requirement for you to peer with them will be an approach.
Yeah.
But, okay, Ben.
Yep. So we were the first in Africa to join manners, and it's that requirement. It's not a hard requirement. There are some. I mean, I don't know how many people have actually read our peering policy. It is available online, and it is, it is implemented as fairly and consistently as we can. There are some items in that are hard requirements, and we won't look at peering without those. There are a longer list of preferred requirements, and manners is one of those lists. Certainly, if people are actively and persistently breaking any of the principles that are contained in manners, then that would get them de-peered very, very swiftly.
Nishal?
Oh, I've got so many questions. The first is this idea about how manners should be used as the base for how peering should be. So there's a very large network, big network, and we'll name no names because I don't want to shame them, that signed up for manners initially, and it has been found to not be quite as, what's the correct word to use? Thank you. Quite as well-mannered as they were. So if they approached you, would you say yes or no to peering? This is a one-word answer.
So for clarity, Nishal is talking about cogent.
I was not mentioning any names. I'm just saying. I was not. And for the record, I was not. But that's not the discussion here. Okay. There's a large network that has significant value to your network if they came to you with settlement-free peering. But you putting in this block, because that's what it is, it's a block, right? Whether the block is well-mannered, I'm liking this, or not, is not the point. The point is you put in a block, and that's preventing you from getting open access to this network. Would you do it or not?
So you missed my point of what I was just saying. It's not a block for us. It's a preference.
Okay, just
we
to
would be more
sorry,
inclined,
if I can,
we would be more
it's also an
inclined to say
opportunity.
yes.
It's an opportunity to give them good manners.
Yeah, that didn't quite work out in this case. Remember, you've got somebody that signed up to say we do all these things and then they don't, and network hygiene is a difficult thing. So I have a few things to say. First is a question to Mark Tinker, if he's still in the room. I run an exchange point in Africa. I've been doing this for a while now. You don't have to answer me, Mark. We can talk about this during beers. So does Andrew, also runs an exchange point in Africa. Been doing this for a while now. I think both Andrew and I would be really curious to find out what makes route servers in Europe better than the route servers that either of us operate. And we'd love to discuss that with you.
Yes.
But my question is this.
Nishal, before you go on, can I just add something in there? So I was always a very big advocate of route servers, and I think you and I have had this discussion before, and I think you were possibly on the other side of the fence. Route servers were great when you have a number of peers at your exchange. It's easy to connect to them, and it's easy to get going, and it's easy to get peering to a lot of people. But what we found, and one of the biggest mistakes we made, was two things: getting people onto the route server and putting in reverse DNS entries with our name in them, because the exchange point became the route server. So we had people looking at the route server as the exchange point, and people were phoning us and saying, "Oh, well, I can't pick up this network and that network from the exchange point." And we said, "Well, you're not peering with them." They said, "Of course I am. I'm peering with the route server." And from a support point of view as well, the reverse DNS. If you do a trace route and the only name that comes up in the trace route reverse DNS is NAP Africa, who are you going to call? So we've gotten so many calls from end users saying that the internet exchange is down only because our name popped up in the trace routes. Yeah. So anyway.
But that's not my question. And Mark, I'm happy to talk to you about this later. Effectively, I'm saying to you that as a supplier, if you think you can get something better done in Europe, but you can't get it here, please let me know about it, because I'd love to fix that for you. My question is this. We've heard a lot about open peering, and we've heard a lot about open peering and what's working and what's not working for people. And one question that comes up routinely all the time, and I'm asking this from a devil's advocate perspective, is what about regulation? No one said that word yet. Is that because there's no lawyers here? Rom? No, Dom's not here. Is that because you don't want regulation, or do you think that there should be regulation in place to force these things? Now, I probably can guess what each of you would say, but I'm sure there are people out here that might want to listen to your views on that and how it would contribute to you maintaining an open peering environment.
And just to add on that question from Nishal, I think in Rwanda, if I'm not mistaken, if you're a service provider and you intend to bid to provide government agencies with connectivity, you must first be peering at the local IX. It's a requirement. Yes. Yes.
So Nishal, to respond to your regulation question, I think that's going to an open and somewhat endless debate that people on either side of the fence will have views on. But I will point to the one example that we have of this in South Africa. We have spent years and years on the side of voice interconnection, with the regulator getting involved, enforcing requirements on how interconnect is put together, enforcing requirements on what may and may not be charged for voice interconnect, enforcing everything and the kitchen sink because there was one strong operator who dominated the market and were basically being, as we've discussed in the IP context, they were basically refusing voice interconnect to their network. And this has evolved and it's been ongoing in various ways for probably 8 or 10 years now. We've now reached the point where voice interconnect in South Africa is firstly so heavily regulated that in order to have a voice interconnect with a large network, I have to sign a 200-page document, initialed on every single page, signed at the bottom. I now have a rate that, because the regulator hasn't got around to reviewing its rate card and its glide path, the rate is now stuck. The interconnection rate has now hit a plateau, and until the operator gets back to reviewing and going through market analysis and all the rest of it, the rate is likely to be stuck at the rate it is now, potentially for years. And we're now in a point where the environment has become so heavily regulated that it's not going to move. Whereas on the flip side of IP interconnection, we now have this situation where IP interconnection continues to evolve, it continues to move. Andrew's comments about many of the big operators who are shifting their views, some of them slowly, and that's large corporates for you, but they are shifting their views on these things. And to some extent, some of the larger operators who refuse to shift their views are becoming less relevant. Some of the operators that I was desperate to peer with 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, some of the operators that I was desperate to peer with 6 or 7 years ago, I don't care about them anymore because they've got nothing on their network anymore. They've got no content, they've got a few eyeballs, and all of the stuff that I care about is on other networks. So if they're not openly peering, it doesn't really make my life that bad.
Okay.
Sorry, Nichelle, the other reason we don't talk about regulation is because we don't want to give anybody any ideas. So.
Okay, so Jessica goes first.
Thank you. It's not so much of a question, but more of like a request. So with you guys handling most of Africa's peering, and I would like mostly to, I think, challenge you guys as big business to support more deployment of cash servers. That way, Africans can create more local content, and we can share information more freely with one another without having to rely on, great bandwidth from CCOM or, having a great service provider, because a lot of people in Sub-Saharan Africa are still connected to the incumbents, and they're not necessarily giving them the best service. So if we can allow for more free peering, there can be more content that's being generated, more content that's being shared, and that sort of will address a few of the social responsibilities and social issues that we have as Africans in Africa.
Just an addition, I think, from what I think Jessica is saying, to be the flip side of now the issue about peering, the CDNs. I think the provider is now talking in terms of, across Africa. There's also that tendency of some CDNs leaning towards one region than the other one. And yet, coming of CDNs in an exchange point is like drives like almost all members within the region. I think case in example is Tanzania, when we have the GGC there, and I think Akamai, once they launch there, it's like every member is peering there. And so it's like one of the drivers. So as much as we have problems, we have drivers, and so big up for the CDNs who are rolling out everywhere. Some of them are concentrating in one region, like Netflix. They need to move around and not stick in only South Africa.
Okay, Andrew?
Sorry, I just want to add this. Sorry, Andrew. So Simon's mentioned the GGCs, and what a lot of people tend to forget is that just because it is a company that's not necessarily based in Africa, it doesn't mean that it's not local content.
Yeah.
All right. So the GGCs are here. Google is in Africa. There is a platform there for you to put local content on, and the actual traffic is local in that it doesn't leave the borders.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment quickly on what Nishal said, and then I actually want to respond to what Jessica said as well. Firstly, Nishal, it's not a question of a root server in Europe or Africa being better or worse from our perspective. It's a question of, if I've been on the root servers for a long time at an exchange and I've seen relatively clean traffic where I haven't had problems, I'll stay on the root server. I'm on the South African root servers largely because I haven't seen that many problems. I'm on links. I'm not on the root servers further up in Africa where I've seen constant problems on those root servers. So for me, it's about how many problems have I seen that I have to constantly adjust to. If I'm seeing relatively clean behavior on the exchange, I'll be on the root server. If I'm not, then I'm going bilateral. And most of the countries north of South Africa, I am bilateral only for that reason. Then on the content issue, my shirt at the back of it, if I'm wearing the right shirt, says 80% local content by 2020. Here's the thing. We need to stop focusing on content creation. We need to start talking about where the content is delivered to the networks. Because here's the thing. If people want to view videos of cats, they don't care if it is produced in Nigeria, in Kenya, in South Africa, in Tunisia, or in Outer Mongolia. That's not our job. Our job is to deliver what people want to watch. The trick here is to bring that content wherever it is produced local. Be that a GGC cache, an Akamai, a Cloudflare, our own CDN. It is not about the content creation, because that's a whole other game. And if we keep insisting that we need to create this content, what guarantee is there that there's anyone going to watch it? Let market forces determine what people want to watch.
Jessica doesn't agree with that. So, okay.
No, I
Jessica.
don't
Let people watch it.
I think that as much as, yes, it is important that we share content, it doesn't matter where it's generated, I think there's huge proof using WhatsApp, right, that local content that has been created by Africans is being consumed much, much more by Africans. And we should care. We should care about where the content is coming from, because then we're touching on who owns the content. And if somebody else owns the content cannot be shared freely. Do you understand what I mean? It requires licensing. Netflix, for example, you still have to create, a fake American account. I mean, all of us went and took our cousins' addresses who live in the UK so you could get IPTV. Finally, we're moving to a place where IPTV is much closer, but now you need 4K, video in order to watch X kind of shows. But if we were creating our own content and we owned it, we would regulate how it's shared, we'd regulate the quality in which it's shared, and we regulate how it could be shared and who can access it. So it is important that we own it. It's not important that we just access it from wherever and somebody else made it. It's also important that we own it.
So good point.
So if I could just respond to that briefly. I'm not sure that our local content creation environment is in that dire a state as it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's certainly got a lot of room for improvement, but I think we are progressing, and ensuring that the network operators are providing internet access to the producers of the content and making that available is an important element of that. But if I open my YouTube stream, and maybe I've got some contorted, strange kind of AI thing working on my YouTube, but when I look at the South African trending videos, there's normally someone who's crashed a car, and there's normally something from Trump, and then the next 20 or 30 items in the South African trending videos are reproductions, and I've got no idea whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, but reproductions of South African soap operas from TV. And based on my experience of some of our customers who are providing internet access to the townships, people are not buying a TV license and buying a TV and putting an aerial on the roof. People are watching the South African soap operas on YouTube. No. I think it might be legitimate. I think that the SABC is actually uploading legitimate copies of their own content to YouTube.
I actually have seen that is the producers of the content are actually putting them on YouTube because they generate revenue from the advertising that is placed on those on that content on the videos.
But one of the problems we've seen with that, as I said, is that that's not considered as local content because it is on a non-local platform.
Yeah.
But it is local. From a technical point of view, it is local. It is here. It is in the country.
Thank you. So we'd like to move on. I think we've run out of the time that we had allocated for this session. But I had one other topic that I really wanted to touch because it popped up a little bit. Simon mentioned the cost of peering when you join the IX. And we have an IXP operator here who doesn't charge. And I'm pretty sure you are in somewhere you actually do pay. And is that considered an issue when it comes to cost of access to, the issue of free versus paid IXPs? What do you think about that from a cost of access, a cost of peering, sorry?
Yeah, so I think if I remember very well, when 37100 joined NAP Africa, the reason why we joined first before joining the others, I couldn't process approvals for money, you get, and then next I had to process for the rest. So it affects big time.
Okay. Yeah.
So, at the risk of writing blank checks to all the IX operators in the room, the cost of IX ports in Africa is not that much of a consideration for us. Some of the exchanges that we peer at in Europe are fairly expensive, and given the cost of replacing that with transit in Europe, that starts looking, we start looking, harder at the cost of exchange interfaces in Europe. But in Africa, it's not much of a thing. And whilst I appreciate that, I don't get a bill from NAP Africa every month, it's not like it's not in my colo bill.
I have to agree with Ben. I mean, the cost of connecting to the exchange point is about a total cost of the experience, shall we call it? And to isolate it down to the cost of the peering port, I think is naive. Unfortunately, I think we do have a lot of people who are naive or maybe start off naive and then get a bit of a shock later on. There are many elements and many costs, right from the co-location fees, the cost of how power has got expensive in South Africa, the cost of the equipment, the cost of optics, the cost of cross-connects. There are many, many costs apart from just the individual cost of the port. Another sort of hidden cost, you might call it, that's starting to develop in South Africa is that once you peer at the South African exchange points and you connect to a root server, a lot of people are suddenly realizing that their routers actually don't carry the size of the routing table that you can do for a root server in South Africa anymore. Because we've got from the point of you get 2,000 routes from all of the networks in South Africa to what probably 120,000 routes, which suddenly goes beyond so suddenly you need very different hardware. And that's not a hardware capex expense is a very different realm to a port fee that you pay every month. And then there's obviously technical considerations. Connecting to an exchange point to get resilience for my network, to get improved performance, to get reliability and efficiency with connecting to other networks outweighs many of the other costs in the long term.
Okay. Mark?
Thanks, Michuki. So I think what we need to going forward look at is perhaps to sort of control or channel the message we send back to a lot of networks. Okay, peering is great and it's good, but in fairness, it probably isn't for everyone. And perhaps some networks, as we've seen, as we sign customers up, are better off dealing with their provider for connectivity versus dealing with them and peering for various reasons. And I think it's incumbent on us to send that information across to customers or potential peers to say, look, make the decision to, and make an informed one to say whether peering is useful for you or whether transit is useful for you or not. But on the other side, and this is something I think we discuss at every meeting with Andrew and Michelle for NAP Africa and so forth, is we thoroughly enjoy the NAP Africa service without any doubt whatsoever. And the model they've employed has been successful and can be replicated. But we've always said that, the main concern for us as CECOM is if there's ever any change in the situation at NAP Africa that has to change, we want to know that NAP Africa can be a going concern. And that if we have to pay to enjoy the privilege of peering at NAP Africa, we're happy to do so because we know. Can't enjoy free things forever, but. I trust that as long as Andrew and Michelle are at Terraco, it's a sorted thing. But I also know that I could wake up one day and they're not. So I'm happy to pay for an exchange point reasonably that is offering a service that I value for my customers, right? And I still agree with Ben that Europe is going out of whack and there's other models that have come up now that are looking to reduce that by not having metro networks and so forth. But ultimately, I don't think free for all is best at all times. You should be ready to pay something because you have customers on the other side that are giving you money.
Okay. Andrew, then.
Just quickly, I'd like to nominate Mark for the job of making that explanation to those networks, because that was a lot more diplomatic than I could have managed.
Right,
also,
Andrew.
Mark, I'll send you a bill tomorrow.
Only him.
Only him. I mean, he's willing. So, look, https.peering.exposed. Go and have a look at it. It will give you a fair representation of what's happening in Europe. I think a lot of you have seen it. And I think Ben has mentioned it as well, where a lot of exchange points are becoming more expensive than transit. As Mark said, we've had this discussion many times before. We have a different model. Okay, we offer our peering ports for free because there is a very direct path to the co-location. Right, we are open to peering with anybody. You don't need to be a customer of the co-location. But I'll say this up front that the Internet Exchange has been one of our best salespeople, and at the same time, offering that peering for free. It has connected a lot of networks. It has gotten a lot of networks that previously would not have peered to actually start peering. And when you go and speak to people like that, it's easy to remove those barriers, because there's always an excuse when you go to some of these big networks. There's always an excuse as to why they don't want to do it. We're trying to remove the barriers to make peering as easy and as open as possible. As Mark said, yes, we don't charge at the moment. That doesn't mean that we haven't put a lot of money into it. With the recent changes that we've made, we've spent a sizable amount of money just on the equipment that we're putting in. But we know that the advantages of that are tenfold. Okay, so it doesn't make sense for us, and we actually did an exercise, the other day, because NAP Africa is actually registered as a separate company. The cost of administration of doing billing would be more than the money that we would make. So we would actually end up in the red. It would cost us more money to charge people for ports.
Okay, so Anthony, last.
Okay, so mine's more just a statement. I think everybody in this room can agree that the value that NAP Africa has added to the South African internet economy it's difficult to quantify. I think we're all very, very appreciative that NAP Africa is here. And I think the fact that we've got more than one peering organization association, whatever you want to call it in South Africa, means that we're a maturing internet economy, without a doubt. And I think the fact that peers might say, I only want to peer at Jinx, for example, I don't want to peer at NAP, or I want to peer at NAP and not at Jinx, for example, is a very bad statement. I can talk from my own network experience. CDN's content goes down in one peering point. I don't even notice it. I'm peering at the other peering point. And I think that's what people aren't seeing enough of yet. And we saw this about a month ago, and a lot of people phoned us and said, are you seeing the same problem? I said, no, we peer at Jinx as well, or we peer at NAP as well. And I think operators that are with the mindset of just, I need to peer at Jinx, for example, and nowhere else, well, maybe you shouldn't be operators. Maybe you must rather think about peering at both places, or just extend your peering out of just one location or one cable.
Yeah, and
otherwise buy more IP transit.
It's like I said, I don't care how people connect as long as you connect.
Okay, good. I think we'd like to close. We've run well past the time that was allocated to us, so I'd like to request you to all give a round of applause to this excellent panel. So thank you very much.